This is the Western View walkthrough, recorded December 31st, 2019. We are in the attic. And going downstairs. If any of my disembodied friends, my invisible friends, want to speak, the microphone on this phone may also record you if you would like to talk. Steps. This is the attic door. Some historic preservationists have come through and suggested that that door dates back to 1750 because of the style and the kind of nails that are included in its construction.
Scary grumpy pipe.
One of the upstairs bedrooms. Where we have sometimes encountered something that growls in this room. Several occasions. Hence we call it the growling room. Crossing the hall to what we call Glenn's room because it's been haunted by a man who has identified himself by that name. There is a room number from back in the day when this was still a working hotel. There's a view through the window of the front yard, what is now the front yard, showing the underside of the colonnaded porch. Down the long hallway, walking south to the southernmost room. Apparitions of a little girl have been seen here. Former residents who lived in this room have claimed to have the bed sheets pulled off of them in a mischievous, playful kind of way. Furniture is moved in this room. When it was an antique store, the proprietor, Cheryl, would put things away at night and find them in new places when opening up the next morning. This is also the room where we perform the knocking experiment. About 1 time out of 10, if you knock on a wall here, the dead will knock back. So we're in the southern end of the upstairs. Here's a view through a window of the early 20th century cottage, which when this was Martin's Manor, the caretaker, the groundskeeper, he and his family lived in that cottage. I think it dates back to about 1920, probably not much earlier. So that is looking west. So here is a view of a mechanic shop and other buildings associated with the flea market on the property. The flea market was originally a motor lodge built by the Martins. Into the master bedroom. This apparently was the Martins' own bedroom when they operated Martin's Manor. And this is the room where Thomas J. Martin passed away. And lore is that when the EMTs arrived, they found him in bed, already gone, couldn't be resuscitated, but he was surrounded by rolls of cash. Notice some of the changes. These doors open onto the hallway that we're going down next. Traditional keyhole with a little cover. I wonder how old those doorknobs are. You can see that modifications have been made and that the molding has been cut away to accommodate this wall. I call this the crooked door because it has been shaped to accommodate the roof line. And at the end of this hallway is the room that we sometimes refer to as the Grumpy Man's room.
Hey, Spooks, do you think the Bruce is talking too much?
And these little doors open under the eaves, a little storage area. I think it would be a great place to play hide and seek if I was a child who lived here. How old this is, I'm uncertain. If it goes back to slave days or not, I don't know. There's no conspicuous marks or writing. Some of the doors have got graffiti on them. Here is one of the doors. This is the other side of one of the doors, and there's the other door that were in the master bedroom. There is no electricity in this part of the house. Another door that opens into a storage space like the other one, but notice that the doors are painted black here. This one, and this one. Nope. I will not bother you. This is the restroom. This door here is also painted black. And this restroom served the bedroom we're going into next, which is what we call the Grumpy Man's room. I don't understand why even the doorknob is painted black. Seems like a strange color choice. Now, the thing about the Grumpy Man, several paranormal investigators have gone into this room and had their equipment mysteriously shut off. Notice that this room is equipped to receive a padlock on the outside of the door. I don't know how old that hardware is, but it would certainly explain the presence of a grumpy man if there was a family relative who had dementia, some kind of psychosis, and at least periodically they had to keep him in a safe place where he couldn't get out, run away, or whatever. So this is the Grumpy Man's room. Before I came to know the Grumpy Man, on one of my first investigations, I was in this room. There were bookcases with merchandise all around the walls. And I was standing in the spot where I'm standing now, and I asked the ghosts to touch me. And they obliged me. Again, black. See the black door. I mean, is there some kind of tradition about why you would paint the trim and the doors black? Is that, and you know, there's a color of blue called haint blue that people will sometimes paint rooms to keep the ghosts away. It's supposed to repel ghosts. Haint blue. So is there some kind of similar lore about black paint? I don't know. This room has no electricity, right? Now I can look to the north, and there's the roof of what we think was the location of the original 18th century kitchen. The house was expanded to include that building, but there's no way to get into that roof area. There's an attic space above it, but there's no access. You'd have to go in through a window. So we're in the northernmost room in the second story. Some of these cracks are not just from routine dilapidation, but probably from the earthquake that Virginia had. What year was that? 2012? 2014?
2014, this is before I got here.
The building lost 2 of its 3 chimneys in that quake. Back out. Here's when Cheryl started operating this as a antique store, she removed most of the doors from their hinges because they were just in the way. Kept them in the attic, and now they've been moved back down. But you can see how the doors have got very old door hardware on them. And because this has served as a flop house after the Martins moved out, you'll see graffiti on some of the doors from people who lived here or crashed here. Somebody loved Philip. I mean, good Lord. How old is that? I don't even know where that came from. Okay, going downstairs. Looking out. Don't know if you can see it well, but there's a shed, sort of a barn structure. Early 20th century. We're looking to the west. This is the foyer. When we do ghost tours, this is where we routinely do our EVP sessions for those guests. There's the front door, what serves as the front door now. Directly opposite behind me is the back door, which we think may have been the original front door. On the other side of that door, there is a porch that is elevated as if to receive passengers departing from, disembarking from carriages. It's just the right height for somebody to step out of a carriage or a coach. But notice the proportions of the door. Here's some exposed beam work showing the post and beam construction. There's a peg, a wooden peg, holding this together. There were originally French doors here. The places where the hinges were still there, as well as the receiver for the bolt. This is the eastern view out of what I call the parlor. A very old mantel. High ceilings. People only built houses with high ceilings as a mark of affluence because a house with high ceilings was a lot more expensive to heat. space behind here. I've looked with flashlights and stuff. I don't see any artifacts back there, just dust, bits of plaster. Exiting the parlor, going into what I call the dining room. And the nicest feature in this room, besides how bright it is, because of the windows, is this ornate mantle that goes right up to the ceiling. It blends Greek and Egyptian motifs. You've got, what is that? Doric, or Ionic, it's not Corinthian columns. Fluted. A rosette. Some sort of a symbol, probably, of plenty, of prosperity. We go up, immediately it's Egyptian. All the way up to the lotus capitals on these columns. And the molding work around the top. Some people say that this mantle dates back to about 1810. And there is a similar space behind it. Nothing noteworthy that I can see except where paint is peeled off in large sheets, which means that this brickwork was painted before the mantle was put in. A very rickety floor, much more so. See, the mantle is so big I have difficulty getting it all in one shot. Now, architecturally, this room that we're walking into is called a hyphen, and it connects the rest of the house with this room on the end. There's your mantle in one shot. And from here, I can just see through the parlor, across the foyer, and into one of the other rooms over there, which we call the Eastern Drawing Room. This room here sits where I would have put an 18th century kitchen. The house was much smaller when it was constructed, and a typical pattern of behavior for the 18th century was to build the kitchen separately. They were likely to burn down, and it's a lot cheaper to rebuild a burnt down kitchen than to rebuild the whole house. A view to the east, showing the flea market. Those apartments are recent constructions built in the last 12 months on plantation land. They had to knock down an old house, a farmhouse, to build them. Who knows what kind of graves they disturbed. Now this is the room that has no access to the attic area. There's a cover for a stovepipe. Interesting footnote. On one of our early investigations, I asked if there was somebody buried beneath this building, beneath this structure, this end over here. The very next day, floorboards were pushed up from below. Now, when the Martins operated this building as Martin's Manor, I don't know what use this part of the building might have had. Black paint again. But I think that, this would be a good place for a commercial kitchen to serve the rest of the house, with the dining room on the opposite end. For hotel guests. I believe these lighting fixtures are all Cheryl's, the antique store proprietor. I don't know about that rosette on the ceiling though, but it's definitely an add-on. Through the dining room, through the parlor. Parlor is noteworthy for the amount of activity that we hear with our own ears in here. Knockings and rustlings and footsteps and such. A former landlord said that someone saw a full-bodied apparition of a Civil War era soldier and a woman in a hoop skirt dancing in this room. Of course, I've got my recorder going while I'm doing this.
He said, down the development is covering the windows. Oh, right.
Hello, everybody. We call this the Eastern Drawing Room. At the end of the day, in the 18th century, when the day's work was done, people withdrew to a different room for the men and women. And those were called drawing rooms. It's where recreational activities, the men would go to one and they would play cards and drink whiskey and do other manly things. And the ladies would withdraw to a different drawing room and do feminine things. Drink tea, I suppose, needlework. Entertain the children. Another vintage mantle. Suffered a little bit of damage over the years. Probably from people hanging stockings. I don't know if the mirror is original. It seems like a very modern looking mirror. We are crossing the hallway, crossing to the other side, to what we call the Western drawing room. You can see some very old brickwork. The proportions of the bricks are supposed to tell you how old the place is. Over time, the proportions of construction materials, like bricks and stones, have been changed. Here's a beam with tool marks made by hand tools. The tool that made these marks is called an adze, A-D-Z-E. I could be completely wrong, but it could be a hatchet or something. Somebody has shaped that beam up by hand. More brickwork. More beams. Some of the plaster lathing. More beams here with tool marks on them. And notice these notches. My guess is that these cutouts were designed to receive beams that went across to hold the ceiling. So originally this building may have had a ceiling right up here, just slightly higher than I am, slightly taller. But think about who made these marks, how long they've been here, how long ago it happened. Historic preservation has placed the earliest part of the building at 1750, which means that these could have been made by slaves. These marks could have been made by slaves. It's tragic to think that the only mark these people were allowed to make in the world with their own lives in hands are right there. To build some white person's house, rich white person's house. Traces of linoleum, patches made to fix damage. Don't know how old this mantle is, but it was not originally affixed to the wall when the antique store opened. And behind it, there is a hole in the chimney to receive a stovepipe. So at some point there was a wood-burning or coal-burning stove of some kind in here. This might have been a family's kitchen. On our paranormal investigations in this room, we have recorded the sounds of domestic activity, such as spinning wheels, I'm going to walk to the south. This room is a later addition. You can tell because this is the chimney. On the opposite side of the wall from the easternmost drawing room, there is no fireplace here. I think that if this had been built at the same time as the chimney, if the room had been built at the same time as the chimney, there'd be a fireplace there. Same story in this room, which is the bathroom. We're using this as the bathroom. Black paint. Some modifications to the bricks. Toilet is behind the door. My first investigation here, I didn't use the bathroom, but I came in here and asked questions. And as I was exiting, a ghost says, "Wash your hands." Good advice. We're going to go. This is a tiny, tiny kitchen. Somebody has added sometime during the 20th century. So probably this was one large room at some point that comprised this tiny kitchen, that bathroom, and this room. I think this would be a good place for servants to stay. The house servant, the slave who took care of sweeping and ironing and emptying the chamber pots. Going down into what we call the sunroom. I believe this, during Martin's Manor's days, this may have been the hotel's primary dining room. The Martins operated a standalone restaurant that is no longer standing. That was just on the far side of the flea market, right up against the highway. That is Jefferson Davis Highway, US Route 1. I have very little to say about this room. We've caught some EVPs in here of females. The high from Susan was recorded in this room. One of those Class A EVPs that sounds like a live person in the room with you. Who Susan was, I don't know. So now we've explored all the rooms on the first floor. All that's left is the basement. The inside of this door is painted green. Now, I should probably say that all this time I've been thinking that the earliest part of the house was probably from about this wall across to that wall and across to this wall, with the doors facing each other. In typical 18th century fashion, you would open a front door and a back door to get cross breezes on hot days. But now we're not so sure that this is the oldest part of the house. The reason, as Cheryl made a discovery the last time we went into the basement, is that it doesn't make sense if this northern side of the house, which is in this direction, was added on, because, where is it? Oh, right here. This is siding. Like tongue and groove siding. That would have been on the outside of a house. Lots of different construction phases here. Green paint. Crystal sounds excited about something. So here's the basement. It has several rooms. People say that this particular room was where Mr. Martin kept his wine. So this is the wine cellar. Not in very good repair. But it hasn't been operated as a hotel since the late 60s. His obituary is, I think, 67 or 69. Mrs. Martin carried on for a period of time, but she passed away and the house went up for auction. There's the second entrance to the basement that is covered up by just sheet metal, which I will show you when we go outside. Some brickwork, concrete, poured concrete. You can see where the wood was for the form. Here is the old boiler, probably last used in the 40s, when this place had steam heat. Now, some old-timers who have lived in the area and were in the house back then have come through and said that they heard stories about how during the Prohibition era, the mob, mafia, Al Capone types would dispose of bodies in this. We had one ghost on a recording confirm that, but I need more evidence than one ghost. Just because they're dead doesn't mean they're telling the truth or know what they're talking about. Now, we're in the basement looking towards the east. You probably cannot see it, but there is some brickwork on the far side. There is undisturbed dirt down here. And that brickwork is on the front of the front porch. So that marks where the porch is. So this dirt has not really been disturbed. It hasn't seen sunshine since that porch was built.